Hi, and welcome to another Global GEG event. I'm Jenna Ashley, and I am here today with Patrick from Text Help to talk to you about EquatIO. Hi, Patrick.
Hey, Jenna, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to be here. As we were talking just on the warm-up, it's just gone 9 o'clock here, so it's a little bit dark here in Belfast, Ireland, but we're settled in for the night. The coffee's in hand, the dog has walked, and everybody's happy here. So I'm looking forward to a good night with you guys.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it. So tell us about Text Help.
So yeah, Text Help, the accent from Belfast, and that's actually where Text Help are headquartered, just a little bit north of Belfast. We are, of course, a software company, EdTech, and for 23 years now, nearly 24 years, we've been producing tools to help with literacy and language and maths, and we'll talk about that, I'm guessing, later. And globally now, we have just under 40 million users of the tools, and so we're very excited to be sharing some of that with everybody tonight on GG.
All right, and we are talking about EquatIO today, and I have a special place in my heart for EquatIO because I'm a math teacher trying to teach virtually on all this, and it has been a learning curve, I'm sure, for many of us. So EquatIO. I say EquatIO, you say EquatIO. I say math, you say maths. It's going to be a weird night.
The story is that it was our colleagues in our North American office that named it EquatIO. So, and I've always blamed our North American colleagues for me not being able to pronounce it correctly. So who knows? I'm going to go with EquatIO for tonight, but potatoes, tomatoes, tomatoes. We'll figure it out tonight as we go.
Okay, so tell us about EquatIO.
So it's a Google extension, and I suppose you talked about sort of lockdown and remote learning and things like that over the last while, and EquatIO has now been out for I suppose 4 years, maybe 5 years now. And one of the things we always said about it was we wanted to help make math digital. And EquatIO was designed as a Google extension. It was originally a web app, and then we made it into Google extension. And so as a Google extension to help teachers and students, pupils around the globe get math and make math digital. So make it easier than an equation editor and be able to pop that directly into things like a Google Doc or a Word document or Google Slides, and now things like Jamboard. And so I suppose for quite a while, teachers went, well, I have tools that I can use. I have equation editor. I can manually write. I can take photographs. There's many ways I can do it. And then things like lockdown hit, the global pandemic hit, we all moved to remote learning in one way or another. And suddenly there was this real sort of burning issue that was quite obvious, which was if I have my students and they're using digital devices, how do I get them to actually get math into that really easily? How do they return them for assessment? How do they collaborate with me? How do they do all of those things? And they can't do that with something like equation editor that's built into most of the tools that we all know and love. And so that's really why EquatIO was created and why now we've got millions of users, thankfully, across the globe. And a little stat for you. Last month alone, we had 2.5 million pieces of math inserted directly into documents across the globe. So we've 500,000 students use this every day for their math instruction and learning. So it's a very exciting time for EquatIO.
That's awesome. Now, you mentioned one thing in there about taking pictures and using those to insert them. And that is, I think, one of the things I love about it is because I do have students and I have coworkers who work with students who are low vision, who are, visually impaired, and taking a picture of it, inserting it as an image an equation, the screen readers can't read it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, I think, is some of what text help works with, is making things more accessible.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people would know us as a company for a very popular product globally called Read and Write. And Read and Write is another Google extension, but it was designed, of course, as an accessibility tool originally. It's much wider than that now. But one of the important features within that was things like text to speech. So when we were designing EquatIO, we wanted to make sure that accessibility was there. So for pupils that suffer from malvisual impairments, even dyslexic students as well that might struggle with the concepts of maths and the language of maths and read back, we wanted to make sure that there was accessibility built in. So we'll see as we go through later, we've given students multiple ways to insert maths and also to listen to it back. But the thing that I guess you're referring to there, Jenna, is we also put a mobile facility into it, which means that, and I'll be able to demonstrate it and show it a little bit later, but if you have a student who wants to handwrite maths, okay, because that's just their thing, that's exactly what is best supports their learning. So they still write it on a page with pen and paper. They can still do that now. But then if you think about remote learning, you want to get that digital or you want to make it accessible. They can take a photograph of it with any mobile or a tablet device because they don't need to download an app. And that will automatically link to their resource, say their Google Doc or their slide or their Google form, however they need to get it back to the teacher. But what that picture will do, instead of just putting it in as a picture, it'll take the handwriting, it'll convert it into digital maths, and it'll make it accessible. So students then, when they have it digital, they can listen to it back, so they can kind of check it. Is that math notation right? They can also have it read aloud by screen readers. So everything we do, we make sure that it can be read back, so students who need that facility can have access to it. And the magic thing that we find out about that is that we always think, you design that with those students in mind, then you realize how many other students are starting to use that feature because it's helping them build the language of maths or how they might say something in an expression. So it helps out lots of students that we work with. So hopefully we'll be able to see that one later.
Okay, well, I can't wait. So tell us. What do you got?
So can I share the screen here and we'll go through a couple of slides now, Jenna, and then maybe what we'll do is I'll jump right into hands-on. So I've shared my entire screen here for everybody that's watching, so I'll have lots of tabs open as we go. So let me just get this screen out of the way and let's jump into this one. So I suppose I forgot to say at the outset, Jenna, actually what it is I do at Text Help, which probably would have been useful to everybody listening tonight. But I have an odd job title, I guess. I'm Ed Tech Strategist at Text Help. So all that means is that I focus on the teaching and learning part of what we do. So rather than try and sell stuff, that's not my forte. I let commercial people do that part. I talk about how we might take the tools and how we might apply them into teaching and learning and establish best practice with them. And I hope that's kind of what we're going to do tonight as we go through. What we'll have a look at is maths. We'll see how we can pop things like graphs and diagrams, manipulatives into things like forms, docs, and jams. We're also going to look at that on web pages and how we can make things more accessible. Jenny, you've asked about accessibility, and that's still a really important part of EquatIO in terms of what we do. And one of the secrets about EquatIO that I'm going to touch on as well is all the wonderful things it can do within PDFs. So I can grab questions off a PDF and now put it in my Google form. Or, for example, what I can do is if I've sent out, say, a test paper out to a student that is a PDF, I can get them to use the EquatIO tools to complete that with all of the math notation that we're going to talk about. Now, my first slide is a very contentious slide as we go through because in the warm-up of tonight, we had the whole maths debate, and I tried to go through every one of my slides tonight and put a bracket around the S, and I've realized, Jenna, that I've forgotten about the very first slide. But there's two challenges with this slide, one of which is I talk about maths. So for anybody that's on the European side of the pond or perhaps South America, we're going to stick with maths tonight. For anybody that's North America, I'm going to refer to math just as much. So whatever your chosen word is, the correct choice of math or maths, we're going to go through that tonight, and I'll make sure I reference both. But the other contentious part of this slide for me, Jenna, is me trying to be smart on this slide, easy as pie. You know that you can see what I'm doing there. You can see where I'm going. And the problem is because I end up talking globally, that what I didn't realize early on in this presentation was that everybody has a different view of what a pie should actually look like and be. And so I tend to get heckled quite a bit that this isn't really a pie, depending on where I am in the world. So we'll move on from my painfully badly put together slide that's not truly global. We'll keep going. What we do know, and I think you talked about at the start, Jenna, is that math or maths certainly is painful. If you've used things like equation editor, whether that's built into Google Docs or you've used it in a previous life in something like Word, that's slow. There's a lot of button clicks. It's not that accessible. But to ask a student to complete a piece of work using something like equation editor can definitely be much of a challenge. And so we recognize that in EquatIO, as it said earlier, and that's really why it was created. But what I want to highlight at the start is EquatIO comes in a couple of different flavors. Now, it's cross-platform. We're only going to be looking tonight, of course, at the Google extension. And we'll see that that can work in web pages and it can work on images, but also that can work even on videos. We were talking at the start, imagine an instructional video, and we've explained a maths concept or solution in an instructional video. Perhaps it's just something online from somewhere like Khan Academy. And you've got a student who really needs to listen to that math or capture that math and put it into a document. Well, EquatIO can do that. So we can grab math from a video, we can grab it from an image, we can grab it from a web page, and as we said earlier, we can even grab it from paper. So again, we'll be looking at the extension tonight, which is available freely to all of you if you're a teacher on the call. But bear in mind, this is also cross-platform. So all of the things that we'll look at tonight, you can get that across any platform. But again, we'll be focusing on the Google extension because it has a lot of lovely, lovely features in the Google extension, as we'll hopefully see. We'll also want to see, and I don't know how many of you know this if you're an EquatIO user, but we've got lots of Google Classroom functions built right into the extension. Because when you have the extension and you have that registered up and you're signed in, you also have access to our web app as well. And the web apps are a really fantastic tool, and we'll see it near the end of tonight, because what it allows you to do is create a math assignment. So you can create an assignment directly within what kind of looks like, I guess, a little bit like slides in terms of its interface. So we can have multiple pages, but then we can share that directly out the classroom, and we can have a grading window directly embedded within that. So there's lots of very subtle Google Classroom integrations that run through EquatIO that you may not have discovered, and hopefully you will as we go through tonight. So a couple of reminders on a few things before we actually open up the toolbar and get right into the math content. And that is, of course, it's an extension. If your district has it or your school has it, you should find it directly on your extensions toolbar. It looks like this up here. You'll see that icon a lot as we go through tonight. If you don't have that, you can get it very easily. So if your district, if you're in the US or in Europe, if your school doesn't actually have EquatIO, you can get it because it's free for teachers. So you can get that right away. All you need to do is go on to that link, and I'm going to ask our colleagues on GEG to pop that in, text.help/FFT. So that's our free for teachers link. So that means if you're a teacher and you've got an email address for your institution, you can jump onto that link. You can get Read and Write, which we'll see later on in the series, because we're running text help events every night this week and the start of next week. But you can also importantly get EquatIO. That's full premium version. You've got everything left to go. What's exciting is if you are a Google trainer or an innovator, we've got some wonderful news that we're going to be able to share with you at the end of this series. So that's the start of next week. Just watch out for your comms directly within your educator, trainer, and educator innovator communities, and you'll get access to lots of stuff, even more than what you see there on screen. So watch out for your email and we'll get that to you. If not, don't worry. Jump on that link and you can get access to that. By all means, do that now, so you'll have access to that for the duration of the session tonight. So a couple of things, and we're going to come back to this because Jenna, who very kindly is facilitating tonight, has been using the EquatIO plugin rather than the extension directly for her LMS, which is Canvas. So EquatIO can plug right in. So these tools that you're going to see plug right into many of the popular LMSs. So if your school or district are using Canvas or Brightspace or Schoology, we directly plug into that. So you can get EquatIO in lots of different ways. You can get it on a web page through the web app. You can get it directly in slides, sheets, docs. You can get it in Word if you're on Windows or Mac, or you can get it, of course, within your LMS. And hopefully later on tonight, Jenna's going to be able to show us how it's integrated into Canvas. So after you've experienced the toolbar, you'll see how it might look on your own LMS if you need to use it there, or that's more useful for you than just a straightforward extension. So just before we go into the toolbar itself, so when we open the extension, it's going to give us access to an additional set of buttons. They're going to sit right at the bottom of your screen. You'll see that when I open a doc in just a few minutes' time. But you're going to get buttons that look like this. Now, we're not going to go through all these in depth now because I really want you to see them in action and understand how you might be able to use these well. But just running left to right, so as you know what's in store tonight, Equation Editor is at the far left-hand side. That gives us an easy way to type math. So we can type in natural language. So if we want to have squared as an example, rather than looking for superscript in the 2, highlighting to reduce the button clicks, we can start type the letters SQ, and it'll suggest the squared symbol. It'll also suggest the square root symbol, so your students have a choice. We've got graphing. We work with Desmos on that, so we'll be able to show you that. We've also got handwriting. So if your students are using, say, touchscreen Chromebooks or any touchscreen device for that matter, they can start to handwrite on screen their math content. So as they handwrite on screen, it's going to take it, it's going to convert it to digital, and that's going to be able to be inserted in the document. That's then always accessible. Dictation, I can just speak math. Mobile will come to when we have a look at Google Forms as an example. How can we make it easy for our students to take a photograph of their handwritten work and just get it back to you digitally? MathSpace, that's where we're going to find our manipulatives and our images. Screenshot Reader, which is the dotted line, that'll enable us to play our math back and be able to listen to it, but also be able to grab it from other locations. And then last one, you may not have come across this if you haven't used EquatIO in a while, are our STEM tools. So hidden behind that very fine looking science speaker, we have access to a scientific calculator. So we can now do working out right in Google Docs. We have access to a molecular viewer. So if you're a chemist, you can start to break down a molecular structure and look at it in 3D. And we've also got an interactive periodic table of elements. So we'll see how we can do each of these. Now, last night when I was doing the introduction, we did get asked, were we going to touch on chemistry and physics tonight? And the good news for those few of you that asked is hopefully we'll get there with that absolutely tonight. We'll do a little bit of physics and a little bit of chemistry, because what I really want to show you guys is that when you're using EquatIO, whatever level, if you're dealing with early years or you're dealing right the way through to middle school, high school, and even beyond into higher ed, that when you use an extension like EquatIO, you've got all the tools that you need to drop maths in any way that you actually want. So let's have a quick look here, and we'll jump into the next slide. And good news for you, the next slide says, let's get hands-on. So I'm going to jump in here, and I'm going to jump directly into a Google Doc. So this is a straightforward Google Doc, and I'm going to show you that I can open the extension as I normally would just by clicking it. Now, one of the things that's really handy for your students in this is that EquatIO will figure out if there's math or maths content in a Google Doc or in a slide deck, and it will prompt your students to be able to use it. Now, your admins can turn that on or off, but it's very useful in the early days of trying to get students to use the tool, because it's going to say, you've got math here. Do you want to use EquatIO? It can help you out. And we've got things like EquatIO Academy built in, so your students have access to a whole range of videos and training pieces that can help them with it. But when you open the extension, the toolbar that you see right the way down the bottom here will appear. So these are all the buttons that you just saw on the previous slide. Now there's one extra one there which we'll find really useful as we go. So for any pure math teachers that have a math degree, probably have been through LaTeX, you're not going to use that in most of your teaching unless you're in higher ed, but you are going to use it to be able to grab resources really easily. I'm going to show you how. A couple of things that are worth noting here that people sometimes miss. Jenna at the outset talked about pupils with perhaps some visual impairments. Under maths options here, now, if you're in North America, this will say math options. I promise you it does actually change. But I can change the font size right here. So if I want to change the font size and make my maths content bigger or make it smaller, I can do that. So it means that I can set it at a very high pixel rate, so as it's just basically clearer on screen. I'm going to keep it as large in this instance, just so you can see it clearly when we're running through this. And also for our students there, we got the ability to change the speech engine. And why that's important, particularly for students who have been using screen readers for a long time, perhaps throughout their journey of education. They may well be used to a particular way that maths gets read back aloud to them from their current screen reader, and they may be used to that in what's called ClearSpeak or MathSpeak. So they can set that, or we can keep it automatic, which is just a more natural sounding voice and sounds more like how you and I would speak maths out rather than an actual screen reader doing it. We'll come back to this one here, but that's worth having a look at right here. And the one that I want to show, and it's kind of a power user tip, if you're using EquatIO currently, this is a useful one to know. It's under Chrome options. We've got a quality one here. So by default, it's going to set there at automatic. But what I would suggest you do is change that if you're already an EquatIO user and set it as quality, because what that's going to do is give you pixel perfect math. So anytime you resize the math image directly on the screen, it's going to look pixel perfect. It's not going to deteriorate in quality. And I think that's always really useful here as well. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to set this at large, and let's have a look at the toolbar.
So Patrick,
so the toolbar along the bottom.
Patrick,
sorry, yeah, go ahead.
While you were in there, do you have to renew your subscription? I saw there was a premium section in the settings you were just in the options. Do we teachers have to renew that subscription every year?
Under free for teachers, you won't have to do that. Okay, so you won't have to do that. If you're banned at a district level or school level, then it is an annual subscription for EquatIO. It is, as with all our products.
Okay.
Not sure if that answers the question totally, but free for teachers, free for life. That's all I can say on that one. Is that okay, Jenna?
Yep. Thank you.
Perfect. So let me jump back into the toolbar here. So we'll go into the toolbar, and I'm going to look at the first one. Okay. So this is Equation Editor, or the EquatIO version of Equation Editor. So what happens is when I click this, it knows I want to insert maths, and it gives me lots of options here. Now, we won't go through all of these, but I want to give you an idea of how easy this is. So start off with something really simple, okay? We're going to start off with a fraction, okay? So 1, okay? So we're going to type in a third, but we could start to type the word over here, because that's how we might say it, 1/3, or we might say it as 1/3, depending on the language you're used to. But if I start to type over, it's going to insert that, and now I can insert 1/3, okay? If I want to do plus, okay, and I want to do 1, and I want to do a /, it'll give me the over as well. I'll do it 1/2, okay? If I want to do equals, I could press the equal sign, or I could start to build my language of maths here and start to use these words here. So I'll do, okay. Now, really handy thing here is if I just press enter, it's just like typing in a document. It'll go down to the next line. I'm not going to do that now. I'm just going to insert that single line of maths in there right away. So I'm going to pop that in. So look, that gives me a single line of maths. It's nice and easy. If I hover over it, hopefully you can see this through StreamYard. You'll see here that it actually has the alt tags on it that will be natural spoken English. So it actually says there, in case you can't read it for font size, it says 1/3 plus 1/2 equals. Now, what's the importance of that? Well, if you go down to Screenshot Reader and you want to have this read out loud, so if you don't have read and write and you just have EquatIO, we can drag this over it. And what you can do here is now I can have this played out loud.
1/3 plus 1/2 equals.
Okay, and now it's read out loud, but it's read out loud in natural sounding maths. So look, that's really useful. But what if we want to do something a little bit more? So let's go to something like a quadratic, okay? And we're typing that. So the only thing extra we'd use in a quadratic is really squared. So if we go 4x, you'll see it's the correct x. We type SQ, we're going to get squared plus 4x, and we'll go minus 4. And if we want to move down to the next line, we just press enter, okay? So that's useful. What if we needed the quadratic formula, okay? Because we needed to provide answers to this in the modeling. So we could start to type QUA, and you'll see here that in the prediction that comes down, I can go all the way down, and I can see there's my quadratic formula, hit the enter button, and now my quadratic formula is completed within there as well. So it means for me now, I could substitute the numbers directly into that formula, or I could start to manually type that out. So as an example, if I start to type this out, okay, I can start to type the over out. So I can go minus 4. And if I wanted plus or minus, I'd start typing plus or minus, okay? If I wanted the square root, I could start typing my SQ again, but now I'm going to go down to square root. If I type my 4 again and my SQ, I'm going to be able to get my SQ minus 4. Oh, and that's a multiply by, let's see, 4, and I'll multiply by
4.
Okay, there you go. So if I start to go through this, imagine if I was using equation editor, just how tricky it is. If you've ever tried to recreate the full quadratic formula looking like that in equation editor, it's really, really tricky. So I'll do multiply by 4. Okay, so if I want to insert that, I can pop it directly into my document now. So we're off to a flying start. We've now got some maths here. We know it's accessible, and we've got prediction. So if you take some other symbols, say here, let's say we wanted to put in, and here's a quick tip for you, those 3 dots in the middle, I can move the canvas area up and down just to give me more lines of maths. So let's say we were doing area. So if I do area, I want area of a, in fact, let's not do that one. Let's do volume, okay? So let's do volume, and we'll do volume of the sphere, okay? Suddenly I've now got all my symbols there. I can recreate that easily, okay? So I've got all the prediction I need, and this extends to 250 plus physics formula. It extends to many chemical compound formulas as well, and I'll show you how we get those up. So we've got lots of things we can actually do here as well. So we can actually start to change the color here as well of particular variables in an expression or in a formula. So we can start to pull answers out. What we've also got in here is if I just insert that math directly in, and we can start with a blank canvas really easily just by pressing the clear button. I've also got layouts here as well. So I can go here and I can go layouts, and actually what I need here right now is a 3-digit vertical. So I've got a template now, and I can click through any of these areas, any of these blocks, and I can start to insert the numbers that I want directly within that particular piece of math. And if I were to insert that, we're not going to try and work that out with a calculator just for speed. And I know that's wrong, so I'm going to put insert math in. But as you can see that right now, that's going to insert it, and that's going to insert it directly in the document. I see this is an image. So I can move this, and I can justify this, and I can place this anywhere as well. So I can align that a whole lot better. In that window, there's lots of ways we can do things. So we can have access to a symbol bank if we don't want to use prediction. We can also have access to favorites here as well. So imagine you're teaching to a particular topic, and let's say we're doing volume calculations there as an example of spheres. So we could favorite those, or my student, more importantly, could favorite each of the key pieces of maths that they want to reuse or learn throughout a particular topic, and those will always fall under their favorite section. So that's their revision and review guide right there. On this window, it's worth noting, lots of people wonder what this is, but we've got EquatIO Academy too. So if you got students and you want students to be a little bit more independent about discovering EquatIO and finding out how to explore it with maths, there's 2 things that are really useful. Maybe you haven't seen them there before, but I have access to EquatIO Academy. So this is a full online academy. This will give them gifts. This will give them videos. They can search by tag. It'll tell them what platforms those functions will operate in. So this gives them a really great way to learn maths. But also, again, you'll see this one down here, the little smiley face in the right hand side. The little smiley face tells them that the math that they're typing is correct maths. It doesn't mean it's the right answer. It just means that it's set out in the right way. Okay, so it won't check answers, but it will check the way that notation is done. So this gives me lots of ways to insert maths, multi-line maths, but also don't forget what I also have here is I've got the ability to do this using all of these different functions. So again, we're short on time, but we do have handwriting. So I actually didn't plug in my tablet before tonight, so I'm going to use it, my graphics tablet. I'm going to use my mouse. I would normally do this on either a graphics tablet or with a stylus or on a touch screen. But if I use my mouse and I want to start writing something on screen, so if I'm struggling from a dexterity perspective, or this is just better for me, I can handwrite multiple lines of math on the left-hand side of the screen. It'll recognize them, it'll turn them digital, and it'll let me pop them right into the document. So now if you go back, you should see that x squared is there, okay? And I should have actually just moved that down before we went. So that gives me the ability to handwrite maths. I can do multiple lines on that, so I can keep going and work out an entire solution. But I can also use dictation. Now, I can't do this one over StreamYard. For some reason, the StreamYard audio loop doesn't like me using this dictation. But if you've used dictation in, say, Google Docs, just to get some words on a page, this is exactly the same thing, but it's for math. So it allows me to speak math notation one line at a time and get it into digital format. So if I wanted to take my 4x squared plus 4x minus 4 equals 0, I simply say it like that, and it's going to give that to me in digital format. And as Jenna said at the outset, that will keep it accessible as well, so students can listen to it back as they go. So that's a couple of ways, excuse me, that we can create some standard notation maths. How do we get well beyond that? Okay, so here's a couple of things we can do. We can start to add diagrams, okay? And we do this through another button on the bottom of the toolbar. And that other button is Math Space, okay? So Math Space is where we can put images. So I'm going to look at this from an image perspective and then a little bit more from a manipulatives perspective, okay? So let's just go with an image first. So the last thing we mentioned there, volume of a sphere, let's run with that one. So let's go to Math Space, and all we do in the extension right down the bottom is we press that button. We can still do all the things we did before, but we've got access to shapes and also freehand drawing. So as an example, I can go to my shapes tool, and the 3 buttons will let me search for whatever the shape is I actually want to pop into my Google Doc here. So I can select sphere and I can draw it really easily. Okay, maybe I want to label this up. So I maybe want to say diameter equals 10 centimeters. Okay, so I'm going to insert maths. I'm going to go here. Okay, so I've now got a diagram. I've now got some measurement of the diagram. Maybe what I want to do to illustrate to my students is actually just draw a line. So I could do a freehand drawing on that to show them what the diameter is. Okay, so I could show them that just by hand drawing on screen. Now I'm using a mouse for that, so it's a little bit more clunky than a touch screen. But now I've got a canvas, and you'd be like, well, that's kind of like Jamboard. Well, yeah, it is, but Jamboard doesn't come with any of those images built in. But what Jamboard doesn't do in this case is allow me to press insert, because what happens there is once I press insert, it's going to take that image with all the notation and it's going to pop it right into the document. And it's an image, so I can resize it and I can justify it and I can put it in line. If I'm building a resource, that's great. But if I'm asking my students a question in this document and I want them to explore it using an image, I can get them to do that. Or I could give them a simple image and I could ask them to label that up. Because let's say I wanted them to mark on where the diameter is. All they would get is the sphere, and they could press edit maths, and it takes from your Google Doc. It'll take the image back out, and now what they could do is they could maybe mark on this, for example, r equals 5. So maybe we've asked them just to label up what r is. We'll do that, and what we'll do here is maybe we'll go and we'll take freehand drawing here, and we'll go and we'll make that green, and we'll say that this is r. Okay, so r should be here. Oh, need to pick the pen back up again. R should be here. Okay, So now they've labeled up R, and if they were to insert that back into the document, actually very super fast activity there, and it's just replaced that image at this point in time. And that image is now replaced with the student actually labeling up that particular piece of that diagram. So we can do that, but we can also use the same button, this math space button. And what we can do within here is we can go and we can insert things like manipulatives. So I'm not going to take you through tasks on this because I think it's important that you know how to reuse all these tools. But if I go to Smart Shapes, let's say we're doing fractions. Okay. So in fractions, we can draw a fraction bar really easily. We can change that because we want this to represent, say, 5/8. And we can change the number of shaded areas. So actually, we want that to represent 3/8. So now we've got a visual representation. What if we had, say, something like we want a fraction circle. We were doing fractions, and we wanted to change that. We wanted to change that to an odd fraction, 5/9. There's an unusual fraction for us. But what we could also then do is, let's say we were doing some angles. Maybe we wanted to improve measurement of these angles. We could change this angle. Okay, so I want to change this to, say, a 35-degree angle. We want students to measure the angle, so we don't want them to tell them what it is. So I can turn off the label for the angle. And guess what I can do? I can go down the bottom, and I can pull up my protractor. And there I have a virtual protractor that I can use, and I can align. And we're going to see in a few minutes from now, about 10 minutes from now, we're going to see how this can fit directly in with Jamboard as well. So all of these manipulatives we can now pull into Jamboard, and we can start to use them. But there's other things you can do. So for example, let's say you just here, we just wanted something useful. We had a simple coins question. We can pull in, we can select our currency, and we can pull in things like our coin bank. And there's a tool on here, which we won't have time to go through tonight, called Infinite Cloner. And you know those questions where you put a bunch of coins in and you ask a student to build a particular an amount of currency from the coin pile that's there. Infinite Cloner allows them to pull as many of each coin out from one central pile as they would need to fulfill that task. So it's locked for you, but it's enabled for them to infinite clone any of those out. And you can just turn that on directly with Infinite Cloner. So there's lots of tools here. There's 157 different shapes under this shape tool that we can pop in. So we can search for anything we want. See if you're, for example, a physicist and you want to pop in pulleys because you happen to be doing this. We've got pulleys in terms of access there. If you are here and you want to do smart shapes and actually we're doing some timepieces, we can set this and we can pop in our clock right here. Oh, so we can pop in our clock. Should have made that a little bit bigger. And we can change and we can decide on the time that we want to put on the clock window, and we can insert that directly into the document. Okay, so let me just do that. If I press the insert button now, I can take all of those manipulatives and I can pop them directly in. And if you think back to what we did before, you see all of these can be changed. So if I'm building a resource as part of a question for my students, let's say I have the coins in there as a question. Once they come to the resource in Google Docs or in Google Slides or in EquatIO Math Space, they can click on the image, they can press Edit Maths, they can create the activity, complete the activity, answer the question, annotate on the drawings, or change the imagery around. They can do that all just by clicking on Edit Math. And when they press the insert button again, it's going to go right back into the original resource you created. So that gives us go on ahead.
That gives us a good opening for a question that we had in the chat of how does it work for the student side? One person asking was asking if you have to pay for the students. Is that right?
So yes, so it's free for teachers, and if you want to use it with students, it's chargeable for students. Yeah, absolutely. So the students, when you create a resource under free for teachers like this, the students will just see a document that will look like this. So it will have all of your math annotation. So just because they don't have EquatIO, you won't lose any of this. If I shared this with any of you now as a student, you would see it exactly as I've shown on screen here. Hopefully it would look a little bit better when you guys had created a resource than that. But But yeah, the students would need it to edit and create math in the way that I've done it there as a teacher. They would need the toolbar installed, or they would need to be able to visit the website. So they would need a student license.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll show you just three very quick things, and then we're going to jump into Google Forms, conscious of time. But we've got graph facility here as well. So on this magic toolbar that we've already been through, I'll show you a graph very quickly. So remember that quadratic that we used earlier? If I want to, I could start to type in 4x squared, and I could do 4x, and I could do plus 4. And now what you'll see here is, in fact, I'll do this plus 1, okay, just to move it down a little bit. So I now have that as a graph, and I can import from Google Sheets. So I can just copy from a Google Sheet and I can paste directly into this graph window. If I need to plot a graph, and I can decide where the points join, the color of the points, I can put multiple tables within there as well to have multiple lines. But if I'm just popping in an expression in here, or an equation in here, I can pop it directly in this window, and Desmos or EquatIO will plot that. I can change the scale and the labels of the axis and the points that I have on there. But just for speed, I'm going to go right the way in here, and I'm going to insert that graph just by pressing insert graph. So I've been able to create a graph really quickly. And again, it just inserts it as an image. So to come back to the question, Jenna, that you asked there, as a teacher, if I create this, that's exactly what my student's going to see, because it's just an image. If I wanted them to manipulate it, they would have to have access to EquatIO. So let's see 2 other points on this document before we jump into the form. And points in the document here are, let's take this as an example. And this is something that I'm sure you've all come across before, which is, this is a screen
class. We just started functions today.
But this is a screenshot that's been grabbed from another resource somewhere. So this is not accessible, and it's not editable, okay? So what we can do here is this button, so the screenshot reader. So we need to do 2 things here. We need to be able to make this editable so we can change it around. So if we're doing functions, we want to change that around, we can do that. But also we need to make it accessible so students can get access to it. We can do that really easily. So we can go here. We can drag around this old screenshot that is totally inaccessible and we can't use, and it's taken that, it's converted it into maths. And what many people miss is under the 3 buttons, we have an edit with EquatIO. So it's taken inaccessible maths, it's put it into the EquatIO editor. Now, for example, I could change simple number on this, okay? And I could press insert maths, okay? And that's done 2 things. It's allowing me to edit it, but also it's made it accessible. So again, back on Jenna's point earlier, and you'll notice it's a different font size because it's set that to large. This means that now I can have this read aloud. Now I can edit it. Now I can change it. But there's an even more useful feature for a screenshot reader. And I love this for repurposing. Let's call it repurposing other resources. So let's say I have, I'm in here and I'm in a PDF. And I'm looking at this PDF, and this is a UK past paper question, kind of age 16 or thereabouts, test paper. But in here, so these are practice questions. So I'm doing functions and I want to take this question and I want to add it into my Google Doc. I can do it really easily. Open the extension, open screenshot reader, and just draw over the top of it. Okay, what does it do? It takes it, it converts it into digital, and it allows me to add it into my Google Doc. So I can go here and I can copy that. And if I go right the way back here, I can just go straight in here. And the button that I said we weren't going to use much, this one down the bottom, okay? And all I have to do, Command and V, just to paste that in. And there's my insert math. So now what I've been able to do is, if I'm on a web page, if I have paused the Khan Academy video and I want the math from it, an instructional video that I want the math from, if I have an image that I've seen math in, if I have a t-shirt that's showing maths on it, I have a photograph of it, I can capture math from anywhere by using that screenshot reader, because it'll open up on any web page and take a screenshot from anywhere, just like your normal desktop screenshot reader. But now that means that I can stick that question into a Google form. So any questions that I've got already, just grab it with Screenshot Reader, put it into a Google form. And now I have a much better way to do it. And I'm going to come back, I'm going to hit Google Forms up very quickly now. But what I want to show you is I promised a couple of quick things on science. And I think this is very useful for those of you who need to go, well, what's the more advanced notation here? So for example, if I am here and I'm looking at this speed of a wave. So let's say I want the formula for that. Speed of a periodic wave. I've just started typing SPEED, and now I have that directly in. If I didn't want to use prediction, I could start typing equals F, and I could say multiply, and I can just start typing lambda, and now I have the right symbol in there. So if I insert math, I have 250 plus physics formula directly within there that I can start to reuse. If you go down, something a wee bit more advanced. So for example, in this, calculate the resistance of a copper wire, which is 50 centimeters long and diameter 0.5 millimeters. Okay, well, let's say for this, we wanted to get the resistivity of it, or just give this to our students in the correct notation. So how would we do it? Well, we could start typing rho in this case, and we know this is copper, so we want the symbol of copper. Guess what? We got prediction. So we can start typing copper within here. There we go. There's Cu. We know it's 1.68, and we're going to multiply. So look at all the prediction that's coming up to enable us to type faster. 10. And what do we need? We need power. Okay. So power, and we need -8 directly within here. So we're able to type literally like we would as if we're typing a document. And what would we need to type in here? We need to type in our ohms and meters, and we're good to go. So if I press insert math directly within there now, I've been able to type out some fairly complex symbols there and notation that is frankly really, really, really quick to do. And if I were to go through this, let's see how we would add a physics image to this. So if I go here into math space, remember what we said earlier about some of the images, and I showed you a pulley, and I need to show a pulley. I can jump in, I can go pulley, there we go. I can add the pulley within there. If I wanted to add my weights, I could add those weights directly in. So we won't have time to complete that, but if you imagine now, I've been able to have my students draw and illustrate with an image directly in there. And remember, this is just an image. So I can just resize that directly in. You there, Jenna?
I said, I wish we had this when I was taking mechanics class.
I know, it's like the amount of stuff that's in there, and to be able to, I haven't time to show you, but obviously we can label through that diagram as well. So this could be a raw diagram, so we could show gravity on it, we could show the tension on it if we were to work through a tension question. It's just really powerful to do that. For physics also, if you were doing speed, distance, time, I could just copy all of that into a graph as an example, and I could plot the graph really easily. So a couple of very quick things, because I've hidden away from chemistry a little bit on some of the STEM tools that I promised you I'd show. But if you haven't seen these and you're a chemistry teacher, you're teaching chemistry or science at any level, let's take this question. Calculate the relative formula mass of calcium nitrate. What are you going to need for that? Okay, you're going to need a periodic table of element first and foremost. So guess what? We've got this hidden away inside EquatIO. So there's our periodic table, okay? And we can dock this and we can move it around the page. So let's say I'm looking for, right, so what actually am I looking for? I know Ca, I know I'm looking for calcium. So I'll find it on the table and I'll click it. It'll give me a visual of calcium. It'll give me the Wikipedia short version, and it'll give me all of the relevant numbers I need. In this case, I need the atomic mass, and I can see here that it's at 40, okay? So let me just go here and I'll go down to the bottom and I'll start to type 40. So I know I can start to work this out really easily as I go through. So I'll go plus this case, and I know I need to open brackets because the next one I'm looking for is, if I go through, what am I looking for? I'm looking for nitrogen, and now I can see nitrogen. Okay, atomic mass is 14. And so we know we have 14, and we could have drilled into that. If we need the notation of the element, we could pop that directly in. But if I start to put this in, I know this is multiply by 14. Now, we won't have time to complete the full question here, but you'll see it close the brackets for me. So see if I want to now work this out, I don't need to pull up my calculator on my mobile phone. What I can do is go to my STEM tools and I can pull up my scientific calculator, and now I have access to this tool right here. And you'll see there it's semi-transparent, so I could see anything that I need to underneath. But I could, of course, start to work that out. So I can multiply that 14 within the brackets. So I want to do that first, and I can move that through line by line to come up with the actual answer for that. We won't get the right answer because we haven't had time to fill in all the numbers. But we've got that periodic table of elements there. And the other thing that you may well have missed on the toolbar is we got this too. So if we're doing chemistry and we want to explore, my favorite thing after my lovely beagle dog Charlie is, of course, I should have said my family first, really shouldn't have, but yeah, let's go with Charlie the beagle dog, and we'll go with caffeine next. Family is definitely number one, in case they're listening, but I'm going to put caffeine in here for coffee. I have a whole list of compounds that I can start to explore, but these are 3D and I can change the modeling that I want on that as well. So I have a visual reference in terms of some of the questions that I may encounter when I'm going through a chemistry paper. So look, I have loads of things I could show you in this, but we are fast, Jenna. I know we're running out of time. I'm already 50 minutes and I promised you 45, and we've got at least another hour to go. So we'll try and get this done and say, if you can give us 15 minutes, Jenna, how does that sound? Would that work, do you think? Or are we tight for time? You tell me.
So let's talk forms.
Okay, let's jump into forms. So what I'll do really quickly, Jenna, is I'll maybe just recreate, because we've seen how all the buttons work, but I'll maybe recreate just a couple of elements of that form and then show you what a student might see. And we'll pick on the one that I think you referenced at the start, which was EquatIO Mobile, the ability to take a photograph. So let me show you this. So this is forms with an extra button that if you've never had EquatIO before, you wouldn't have saw it, and the blue button is here. So all I need to do, this is just a blank form. To open that toolbar is hit form, and I can go here and I could, for example, type my 1/3 in right here. So I can insert maths, and now I have accessible maths, really easy, and I have maths in there. Imagine going to this one and we'll go express as a fraction. What could we do? Go back here and we'll take, say, our fraction bar, which is right here, and we'll do it super fast because of timing. We'll put our 5/8 in and we'll insert it into the form. Okay, so we've now got a visual reference that we could put in. So this is good. We're building a really good form that we can start to share with our students. I want to show you this one because this is the one I'm actually going to answer. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to go again to a shape, and I'm going to insert right here. I'm going to insert a right angle triangle. So really quickly, right angle triangle, better mark it up as a right angle triangle. And we're going to assume that each side here is 7 centimeters, because that's the answer that I have written down and I'm going to take a photograph of. So I'm going to insert 7. We're just going to assume for speed that we've got two sides at 7. I'm going to insert that into the form. Now, what else could we do in the form is we could do number lines. We could insert those. We could also insert graphs. So I could insert basic level graphs in here that I could be asking my students questions on. I could jump into Desmos and get a graph from there. I could put in some of the estimation tools that we saw. Or what I could also do, remember, is, you know, that question that we had here before, that question that was from a PDF that I need to repurpose. I can go back here and I can press my blue button and I can go right here and I can just press paste. And guess what? That question that was used to be on a PDF is now a question within a Google form, and I can change that to be a Google quiz. And so I can have that auto marked. So I want to show you this because I know Jenna's got a form that she's going to share with us, which is great. But I want to show you one feature of this that we haven't showed before. So let me go to this this preview. Okay, so this is just me previewing the form. So it's not going to look very pretty because we went through it really fast. But this is what your student's going to see. Okay, so they're going to see that lovely form you just made, but they're also going to have the blue button. As somebody asked before, assuming your students have the EquatIO extension installed. So they can now use the tools to answer. So I could go here and I could press the blue button because I'm the student now, and I could go in and I could type through all my lines, and I could just start to type P for Pythagorean theorem, and I could start to do it line by line. I could handwrite or I could dictate. But what I want to do in this very quick last demo is show it to you on a mobile device. So what happens here is, so imagine your students on a Chromebook, but they've handwritten all of the answers on a page because that helps them learn more. Well, what they can do is they can select the mobile button. Now, I'm just going to pick up my mobile, trusty old mobile phone here. I make no excuses that it's an iPhone just for today. And I'm going to press my camera icon, okay? And I'm going to hover over that QR code just for speed. I'll not share my mobile phone screen. But what's happening on my phone, you won't be able to totally see it, is it's listed off all of the EquatIO documents that I happen to have open. You'll see I have 4 open because I'm doing a demo. But what I can do here is, let me just see if we can get this going. So I'm going to do EquatIO assessments. So I'm going to tap this. So I've just picked the form that I've currently got opened. I'm going to press my camera button on my mobile phone. I don't know if you can see that, but that's just me looking at me. Okay. So there we go. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to go over and I'm going to hover over my little piece of paper that's right here beside me. I press a tick on my document and I press Save as Maths. And what actually happens there at that stage is that answer is going to go right the way into my document on screen. Now, you're probably not going to see it right here, right now. But this will take my math work and it will pop it directly into the document that you see on screen. So let's just see if I press the button. So you should see your screen change now. And what's actually happened there is that my mobile phone has been able to take a picture of, I kid you not, that is the maths writing right there, if you can see it in the light. So that's my solution. I simply wrote that down before tonight, and I've been able to take a photograph of it. I haven't had to download an app on my phone because the QR code that comes up on the screen takes care of all that. It just goes to a website and it links through to your Google account and it'll put it right in the right answer. And you'll see there, my handwriting is not very good, but the maths is the correct maths notation all the way through here, which is great. So now, as a pupil and a student, I can use the blue button. I can put in any math that I want as I go, or I can still use paper and still get it in there. And a tip, if you've got resources that you want to share digitally and you have handwritten solutions to those, or you have older handwritten notes, you can take a photograph of those one at a time and you can pop them right into a Google document. It makes it accessible and it also makes it digital. And I know, Jenny, you've been using Google Forms quite a bit, as far as I understand, and you've got one that you're going to share with us tonight. Is that right?
I actually have one that is what it was like before I started using EquatIO.
Okay, better still. Love it.
How bad it used to be before, which none of it was user-friendly. All of these are screenshots. My equations are a mess. And you can see now that I have it, I've got all these out here, but I can actually change these now to where it looks more appropriate and where my kids, the screen readers, can read it. And that's been the biggest thing for me, is my students with accessibility issues, or my students that have a read aloud accommodation with COVID. It's been a craziness. And they can't read this. The screen readers can't read this. And yeah, I can put this in, but the screen reader doesn't like this either. So it's been really nice, especially with that screenshot reader, where I can just grab it and hover over what's already there and get what I need and copy it and put it right into the line.
And you know, Jenna, I don't know if your students know this, but we changed a feature on that on the screenshot reader recently. So students can decide whether they want it to be read out automatically as soon as they put the screenshot reader over it, or not, and just wait until they press the play button. So we wanted to give them that choice. Very small detail, but very important if you're visually impaired and you need that additional help. These small things are what we try and do in there as well. And do you use that then on a web page as well, as an example? Do you encourage students to listen to maths from a web page?
If they're one of mine that struggle, I'll generally pull them aside, and then they tend to show it to their friends.
Good.
And it helps take some of that stigma away of needing that support.
Yeah.
Which is really nice, because a lot of mine, they struggle with that feeling different. It's they're high school, so they're teenagers, and they're different enough on their own.
Do you know that there's one thing, you know, we always say in text, that was one of the very first things I read when I joined the company a few years ago, was the technology like this is necessary for some, but it's definitely useful for all. And I think that taking that approach and equipping all students with something like this just means that they have that flexibility, and it does reduce the stigma. I see there, you've just said, I've just used Screenshot Reader on this video. I was blown away. One of the things, actually, Jenna, if I could share could I share my screen again just for 1 second? And I want to show you. Do you remember that question there that I had from a past paper? I have answers to that as well. My handwriting's terrible. Okay, it's really bad. Like, it really is. But there's my answer as I wrote it down and scanned it in. But see this answer, right? If I wanted to get that digital and put it into a form or get it back to you as my teacher, Jenna, that's pretty hard to do. But Screenshot Reader is not only suitable for this stuff, it's also suitable for this stuff. Watch what happens when I drag across what is really bad math. Well, no, it's good math, I'm sure, but it's really bad handwriting. If I drag that box across, that's taken each line of that handwritten math. I haven't set this up beforehand. That's literally, it'll capture anything. I haven't trained it to do this. That's a straightforward piece of math. The notation is spot on there. The spacing is right. It's literally taken my handwritten math directly. So that shows you, when a student is handwriting on a piece of paper, just how powerful that is. Now, how long do we have, Jenna? Do we have about 5, or are we pushing our time limit here really hard?
We got about 5 more minutes. Yeah, I promise.
Okay. The one thing that went down a storm recently, and I just want to share it with you because it's a really good thing to do, is I am going to go and I am going to show you a web page, right? So I'm going to go to web content here. I'm going to go to maths content, and I'm going to do something really simple here, which is, so this is just a web page. And what used to happen on a web page is that we used to have only very limited usage of EquatIO. So we can have the ability now to play back math. We can capture it. We can put it into a form. So all those tools are there. But what we've now done is put this toolbar absolutely everywhere. So if you're in a Pear Deck, or if you're in a Nearpod, or if you need to put maths in any location, if you use whiteboard.chat, you can use this tool, EquatIO, anywhere. But the big thing then is, if you do that, you can pop it right the way into Jamboard. So tip and trick in Jamboard, if you're using this collaboratively with your students, what you can do in Jamboard is you can use all of the tools that we've saw there. So for example, if I want to go in here and I want to do, let's just do something really quick for the purpose of this. I just want to put in Pythagorean theorem, rather I'm going to be lazy and not type. The buttons change, just so you guys know. If you're using an extension, you're using it in Jamboard, the buttons change. So that insert math button is not there, but this copy math as button is. And this is one of our hidden gems. You can copy math as spoken text. You know that read aloud text that Jenna was talking about earlier? You can copy that as this, or you could download it just as a PNG. That's really useful. But what you can also do is, I can copy it as an image. Why is that useful? Well, that means that if I just jump directly back into my Jamboard and I paste, I can now put rich math content directly in there. What else could I do with it though? I could go and I could hit my math space button that we saw earlier on, and I could pick something like, what do we say? What do we do? We'll go for an octagon here. So we'll go here and we'll change that. We want that to be 8 sides. And we'll insert that into my Jamboard, and all I have to do is press paste. And in my Jamboard, now I have access to be able to put anything in that I want. What about this? What about putting in a simple graph just to illustrate a point to my students? So I'll just plot a point. I want to change that and make it an X. So I want to do this, and I want to insert that. So I copy as image. And all I have to do is go back to my Jamboard, and I can press paste. And now I have that graph in, which means that I can pick up my wonderful Jamboard tools, and I can highlight any area on this graph. That's very bad with my mouse movement there. But I now have all the math tools that I need directly within Jamboard, but it also means that I can start to use these anywhere. So if I'm in docs and sheets and slides, it's a given. If I'm in Jamboard, I can now use it. If I'm in Word Online, I can use it. So I can use this EquatIO extension anywhere at all that I want, Jenna. So really, really useful. So that's the last thing that I'm going to go through tonight. There's a whole world of EquatIO waiting out there. There is the web page version, which we won't have time to go through, sadly, tonight. But I'll bookmark it and I'll share it with everybody. And if you want to put it in the chat, you can visit that at equatio.texthub.com. That gives me all the power of these images that you saw earlier, but the ability to create an assignment and share it directly with Google Classroom and to have a whole workflow with my students. That's a whole hour in and of itself. So if you will ever ask me back after this, Jenna, after speaking for so long over my time, I will absolutely go through EquatIO Math Space and be more than happy to do so.
I promise I don't mind, because it's such an incredible tool to use, and now with being able to use it with Jamboard is going to make it even better.
Yeah, and we're
integration.
We're active, Jenna, on making sure that we can open that up in as many places as possible. And I know you've been using it, I'd say in anger, and I mean that in a very positive way, in Canvas. And I know you're really getting stuck in, because we mentioned earlier there's a Canvas integration, and you're using that. Is that right? Use it within Canvas.
Am. When Patrick and I were getting ready for this, we actually he was telling me it integrates with Canvas, and I was like, wait, what? You say what? And like I scampered off to go find out, and after that ran upstairs to tell all my other teachers, like, guess what we can do? Because we've come away from trying to use the Canvas quizzes and the Canvas test bank, because it is so difficult to use their the equation editor, buttons to hit. But instead, if once I add it as an app in Canvas, I can come in here and use it as a regular plugin, and I have all the same features right in Canvas. I don't have to try to do anything special. If my computer wants to be nice to me today. Maybe. But I don't have to go somewhere else. I don't have to worry about, like I said, using it as a screenshot and the screen readers not being able to read it. Maybe it doesn't want to be nice to me today. I don't know.
For all sorts of permissions there. The good thing, as you say, is when it's underneath that menu, when you're creating a quiz or an assignment directly in Canvas, the buttons are just there in that little pop-up window that comes up. So there it is there. So that'll be familiar to everybody that's seen the run through tonight.
So yep, I've got all my same buttons. Everything's exactly where I expect it to be, and my computer's a touchscreen. I'm lucky, so I can literally type 3x squared plus 2, and I don't have to try to mess with it, versus trying to use the built-in equation editor, which I don't know if any of you have ever used it. It's functional, but it's not user friendly. It's all the things with exponents and subscripts, and it's too much. It's one less thing that I have to deal with right now. I think we all might feel that way.
When I started going out to schools and colleges and kind of working with the EquatIO, what we used to do is they would always be very skeptical and go, it doesn't really save time. You're just trying to sell us something. And I would always be lucky and say, no, I'm the educator. I'm not trying to sell anything. But what we'd do is we'd say, right, well, how do you currently write a simple piece of maths? And we give them a simple piece of maths, and we literally would have a race as part of the instructional session. And so I would sit there and they could give me any maths, and I would have to create an EquatIO. And they would use, say, in Canvas, they would use the equation editor, if it was in Word or if it was in Docs. And it was so painfully slow to watch. And once they see that they can do things quicker and have it accessible at the same time, it's a big thing. Absolutely. So what I might do just to wrap up, Jenna, is if I can share my screen, and I'm just going to put on a couple of quick links, which you can share in the chat for me. That would be really useful. So just a reminder, EquatIO is free for teachers. Anybody can get it on that link as long as you've got an email address for your institution. You can't sign up with it in Gmail. please don't email me after today and say you couldn't sign up with Gmail. You can't. You need to use your institution email address. But we've also got some nice tools that are there. We've got wakelets, which will give you longer training. If you really like the forms bit that we went through, I created a playlist that lives on one of those wakelets there, the teacher's wakelet on your right-hand side. And that gives you like literally 5-minute instructional video pieces that will let you start on creating your first form with EquatIO and going right the way through to advanced forms where you can repurpose content from lots of places. So you can get each of those wakelets there. Nice and friendly format, lots of good videos. Unfortunately, you'll hear my voice a lot throughout those, so I'll apologize in advance for those. But there's lots of resources there. Also, if you haven't taken a look at our thing links, I'll post that. I'll have to actually post this link out just a little bit later. But the thing links will give you an interactive tour and a guide of what each of the buttons are. Maybe not so much use for you guys on the call and on the session tonight, but when your students get to use it, the thing links are invaluable because it gives them a quick virtual tour. There's my details on the screen. What I'd appreciate, the only thing I ask after tonight is you give me a follow on Twitter. I would really, really appreciate that. At th_Patrick M. And I promise that I only share good stuff on Twitter and make sure that you get access to as many resources as you can. There's my email address as well. And it just goes for me to, I want to thank Jenna. You've been absolutely fabulous tonight, putting up with me talking so much and so fast. But thank you for being a brilliant host, and thanks to all of the GEG community for inviting me along. It's been a real privilege, and thanks to all of you for attending tonight. If there's anything I can do for any one of you, just reach out and let me know. That's what I'm here to do. And hopefully we'll see some of you again tomorrow night where we're talking about Raikou. We're not doing maths tomorrow night. We're doing Raikou, which means I'll not be saying anything, Jenna. I'll be quiet all night. I promise.
Somehow I don't believe that. No. But we do really appreciate you being on with us. And guys, you should definitely check out the rest of the series the rest of this week. Raikou tomorrow. Raikou. I never say that right either. Raikou tomorrow and more throughout the week. And trainers, innovators, I think coaches, expect exciting things coming. All right. Remember, if you have any questions, you can reach out to Patrick. He actually gets back to you really quickly, which is nice.
Usually.
All right. And have a great night, you guys.
Thanks, Elle.